And we're live. We're back. Part 4 of The Alchemist. This is the last one. You want to start with a summary, or you want me to?
You start with the first part.
Okay. The left off, the boy and the alchemist are leaving for the pyramids. They have like a lot of discussion when they first head out. I don't know. I didn't write anything down about their discussion. I know there was quite a bit there. Did you want to notate anything on that or move past it? Because there was a lot of back and forth with them just having conversations where the boy was trying to figure out life and the alchemist was walking through
basically things. He was doing the was it Return of the Jedi? Sent him to see Yoda and like get him to reframe his mindset completely, basically, and make him start believing himself. I thought that was kind of cool. It was kind of a weird, like, parallel. But yeah, it was basically like, you know, getting in tune with your heart, meditating, praying, kind of deal. That's what I got out of it.
Then in their travels, and stop me if I go too far, but I'm just looking at my notes. They run across some of the tribesmen, the guys out in the desert, and they ask the boy about his elixir, and he tries to explain that if you drink it, you will live forever. And the alchemist just laughs at him, and the boy was like, afterward, was like, "What's up with that?" And we had talked about that before. I thought it was a cool part, and so often when you have something that's so cool or so interesting or so valuable, and you try to explain it to somebody else, and they just think you're crazy. And it's what we talk about literally all the time. But
I hate to say it, it's the same thing of Return of the Jedi. There's nothing to see here.
Yeah, you go home.
You know, I mean, you know, we can go on our way. You can go on your way. Thank you. So, I mean, in a weird way, it was that mind over matter. Act like it's not a big deal, and it's not a big deal. They could tell. It's almost like they could tell people. They're used to people being guilty. They can kind of feel it and see it. They didn't feel it and see it off of it.
So then after that, they keep moving along, and then they run into the other group of tribesmen that had the encampment. And the alchemist tells them the boy can basically destroy the village, or after they take the boy's money, he gives them. Right?
What an awesome move by him, right? I mean, like,
yeah,
what a power move! Like,
when he gives him his money, or tells him about the wind, which part?
Basically, projecting what he can do onto the boy, getting out of it. Like, he's the one that does it.
Yeah.
He's got all the money.
And the boy was pretty stressed out about it. I thought it was funny too, because the alchemist's like, "Yeah, don't show them that you're worried about it, because they don't like cowardice." I remember thinking,
but you made me do it.
Yeah.
I thought that was awesome. Like, he's like, "I thought you're my teacher," and you're like kicking me down a hole.
I have so many questions I want to ask right now, but I know we need to finish the summary first. It's such good parts. Let's see if the boy goes down.
This is I think the almost epitome, honestly, when it comes to it. The of the story, the peak.
Yeah. And then I kind of thought this part gets a little woo-woo, kind of weird, where the boy goes out into the desert and starts talking to the desert and the wind and the sun.
It's all been pretty woo-woo, but sure.
It has, but I thought at this point it's more. It went from stuff you could relate to normal life to like, wait, he's talking to the wind. Like, how does this happen? And I've got questions about this, but so we can save that for a minute. The wind does blow. The alchemist. So that all happens. They get out of that situation because the wind does blow. Anyway? But then one of the funny things here was I thought the alchemist starts telling the boy that really confusing story about the dream inside of a dream. That was kind of hard to follow.
Which I forget which part.
He tells the boy the story. It's about like I didn't even write it all down, but I got questions about it in a minute. But he talks about there's like a leader that had a dream. God, I can't even remember now. I didn't write it
For
all
some
down.
reason, I don't remember that part.
It was very confusing. Probably
He's usually getting him ready for what's about to come.
Yeah.
I mean, that's pretty obvious. It's like, I know it's coming. I can't tell you, but here's a few things that might help you.
I didn't write down the whole story. I just wrote down that he tells me a very confusing story about dreams. And it was a story like about a dream he had. And inside of it, there was somebody that had a dream. It's kind of hard to follow.
Yeah.
So then he goes on the last little bit by himself, shows up and starts digging. Some bandits show up, almost beat him to death.
Well,
Wait,
he goes to the Christian monastery also before he gets to before he leaves the Alchemist, and the Alchemist wanted to give him some money beforehand. He goes, I want you to believe that I am an alchemist, and he proved that he can make gold, and he gave a quarter of it to the Christian monasteries. He says, keep, being good people, and then he kept a quarter, gave the boy a quarter, and then gave another quarter to the monks and said, if the boy comes back, he might need this money again because he has a tendency to lose it.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought that was kind of a neat little part too.
I think maybe that's where the guy told him about the dream. Maybe it was the monk that told him the dream.
Maybe
it was either
when they're waiting on the
really.
I think I do remember something about that. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So then after that, he goes on, starts digging. Bandits show up, almost beat him to death, and then the bandit tells him about it, how basically dumb he is for following this dream. And he says, I had my own dream where I found my treasure under a sycamore tree in a church. Basically describes the opening scene. And he goes back there, finds his treasure, and hears the voice of Fatima and walks off with her, and that's it, right?
He walks off to meet her, to go to her, right?
Yeah, he says, I'm coming, or something like that.
Yeah, he calls to her, and I'm on my way, on the wind. And he says he's gonna pay the gypsy, and then what else? I forget. Pay the gypsy and then go see Fatima.
Yeah. He didn't owe the king anything, right? Because he ended up selling him his sheep in a transaction. The old king wasn't falling for that. Yeah.
It made him all in. He had to. He couldn't back out then.
Mm-hmm.
If it was on promise stuff, he could back out if he never gets it. You know what I mean? That was another thing I thought was kind of neat about.
All right, you got questions?
I thought it was neat too when the one part too, where the son, when they were trying to describe love, because that's the part of the whole meditation, the dream state, the whatever he did to put himself into almost like this other world, where he talks to the wind asks the desert, and the desert asks the wind about love, the wind asks the sun, and the sun's like, well, I know what love is. I give the love to the earth, and I'm in the right place exactly, so I love it all the time. And that's when the boy goes, no, that's not the love I'm talking about. I'm talking about the love that changes you. And he was like, whoa. And I thought that was kind of neat, that like humans kind of have a love that is almost, it's hard to even describe to someone. And you couldn't even describe it to the sun. It's kind of a neat, it's almost like, I don't know. It's just kind of an interesting part of the story inside of it.
Well, you got questions, or do you want me to go first?
Do you think that Santiago should go seek out the alchemist to study more before he goes to see Fatima, or should he just go see Fatima?
That's a good question. I don't know. He doesn't, though. Are you asking me if I thought he should have? Because he kind of doesn't. He just goes back, and
that's what he says. But
I hadn't thought of that. That's a really good point, because the alchemist spent a ton of time telling him basically, if you your two options in life is to go work on yourself or go settle down with this person you're in love with and create a life with her, or should you spend more time working on yourself, growing and learning? So that's a good question. I would say he probably should have went back and talked to the alchemist or spent more time with the alchemist. But I would also say that based on their interactions, the alchemist kind of didn't want him around. So, but
because he needs the experiences.
mm-hmm.
But like, if you're an alchemist, what do you need money for? What do you need the treasure for?
Yeah.
If you got a philosopher's stone or elixir of life.
So that reminds me, one of my questions. So is being an alchemist just a parable for being able to create value, or do you think it is really about gold?
No, yeah, it'd be more value than gold because every time he uses it, it's just to better things. It's never to really want, you know.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, like I did have one like thought experiment I was thinking about. I was thinking like, it's almost like in a weird way, part of the story was the treasure was maybe talking back to the world, the soul of the world. Because if that boy would have found that treasure at the beginning, let alone he wouldn't have learned all that stuff, but all that would have been just stolen from him.
Mm-hmm.
Would have all went to places where it would have ended up, going to thieves who are going to use it for things that are probably terrible too.
Mm-hmm.
So in a weird way, maybe like the treasure was kind of working with the soul of the world to make sure that it was something to fixate on, but it never seemed like he didn't even knew what to do with it if he had it. He never talked about what he was going to spend like the money on or anything. He was, even when he had the gold, he's like, all right, have the gold.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't like he knew what he was going to do with it. He just had it.
Yeah, he stayed in a pretty naive state through the whole story. Kind of seems like he never did figure it out,
or he just didn't want anything. Really, he just wanted Fatima.
Yeah, I was going to say, do you think maybe he just never did figure it out and he just kind of fell for her when he went back? Because it does say he did find the gold. He found the treasure box, and they even described it as a Spanish
with
jewels. Like jewels, yeah.
Yep.
So we know he actually did find some form of actual treasure.
Yep.
In addition to his woman lady.
And I think he said, like, first thing he's like, those gypsies are smart.
Mm-hmm.
I thought it's a good story. And it's one of those stories that like you almost can't understand it unless you do break it down.
Yeah.
I mean, otherwise you're going to go kind of too fast through it because most things have so much fluff in it. That one's just pumped full.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have some more questions? I have
quite a few written down there. I have a lot of random ones written down that I can.
Do you think that Englishman became an alchemist?
I don't know. They never really circled back to his character, did they?
Right. I just wondered, like, do you think?
I don't
think
so.
He's going to keep trying.
Yeah, I think he's the kind of guy that, if it was a real story, I think he would have just gotten killed because he seems too annoying and like he's always in everybody's business. And like with those dudes, I feel like somebody would have just been done with him.
He gets hit once in the face. He's like, "Yeah, I'm going back to England. I'm going to sell my books. Anybody want some books?
Yeah, I'm going to be a librarian. This is pretty rough.
I'm just going to tell you what's in these books."
So. Yeah. He doesn't seem to have the stoic personality for it. I think he's just greedy.
Yeah,
turn things into gold.
I think that's the thing is it's just showing what happens when you're only after the gold.
Mm-hmm.
And the gold the alchemist used was always to help someone out, to help the people, a little bit for himself, just in case he runs into bandits and has to get out.
I was going to ask. There was one point in the part 4 where the boy was asking what was asking. I don't remember if he was asking the Englishman or the alchemist, but they were talking about. His question was what was on the emerald tablets. Why do you think the emerald tablets came up so much in this story? And they never really talked about it more, but they referenced it like 4 or 5 times. What are your thoughts on
that? I found it very interesting too. And that's what makes the story kind of confusing to the people that are trying to read it. Like, what? what does it say? You never know. Like what,
Because
but it
then
kind of references it kind of, but it like, I don't know. It's very confusing.
I thought it was interesting that he put that in there, but never put like the Bible in or a specific thing like that. And maybe he didn't want to have a specific religious undertone, but he did put the emerald tablets in there. And a lot of people don't know what that is. But if people did know what it was, and we don't have time to go with that, but it would have been pretty interesting.
Makes the story a little different.
Maybe there's going to be should be an Alchemist part 2 where they do that.
Maybe he's watching this and now he's going to. Paulo Coelho, we would like you to come on. We would like to interview.
We want to talk to you about the emerald tablets, bud.
People so we can ask you if Santiago actually became an alchemist. Yeah, I don't know. I just love that book. I've read it quite a few times. It's one of those that it's like Saved by the Light, one of my favorite books too, that it just makes you feel grateful, makes you realize your own journey is pretty cool. Most people, like, at least I do, I got to look back at my life. I'm like, man, it's been fun. It's been a lot of fun, and I've done a lot of things in the right way. So guess I can't complain about hardly anything, honestly.
I hear you complain a lot, so I feel like you're lying to people on the internet now.
Only about no.
How do you think the boy? What are your thoughts on the part when the boy was talking to the desert and the sun and the wind? Do you think he was just praying, or was he actually? Did the author mean for him to actually be talking to those entities?
The alchemist may have slipped him some mushrooms because he sure did act like it.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I'd say like a deep meditation, prayer as at the same time kind of a deal, like really focusing but meditating. And that's the only thing I could think of.
One thing I found as a follow-up to that thought that I thought was super interesting is inside that transaction of talking back and forth, did you notice how the wind actually became piqued by the curiosity of wanting to talk to more people? So he was trying to figure out how to help the boy, but didn't know how. I thought that was interesting. So they made the actual character of the wind wanted to participate in that action, but
good point. It was like the wind was irritated because it didn't understand.
Right.
And that's a good way of seeing it. What did I have? Well, I think that's all the questions I have. But I thought the whole thing too, the whole scenario of Fatima kind of gets lost, because in the way we live life today and the way we think of love, that doesn't look like love to anybody. But that's pretty cool.
What does it look like love?
Someone that would almost push their husband away to keep going on their journey, even though desert's most likely going to swallow them. But they don't want, it's almost like you fell in love with this guy that is that way. You don't want them to change who they are. And I think it's a good example of if you really love someone, you don't really want them to change hardly at all, only with you, not from who they were.
I kind of want to know why she didn't just go with him.
I think they said at one part, but I mean, think about that. She would have been gone in the first tribesman that found him.
That's true. Back then, if you had somebody that was
gone, she was protected there. Most beautiful woman in the Oasis. Yeah,
that would be tough to leave behind and just be like, yeah, I'm going to go look for gold. I'll be back I don't know, maybe a few months, maybe a few years. Just wait for me. Sure.
And I think too, it's like he didn't really care that much about gold, even though that, like I said, it kept driving him, but it really he didn't know what to do with it if he had it. He didn't even want sheep at that point. So for him to even, most anybody that's been in love, that's the last thing you think about. All you want to do is be with them The last thing you want to do is leave them, especially if it's not really even. But it's on this. He's on this journey. He knew he had to like complete almost, and it was kind of a cool like. Most people wouldn't be able to do that. Couldn't do that.
Especially in that time frame, finding somebody that was like a good match for you and that you were in love with, you definitely wouldn't want to just be like on your own.
Especially at the beginning of the book, it was all about the merchant's daughter. Remember that's all I was talking about. I was always worried about the merchant's daughter. You just need to find that woman. And then
it's a great point. The whole beginning of it was him. Everything he was doing was based around getting back in front of her so that he could talk to her and tell her stories and impress her with his past.
Yep. And by 3/4 through, he's telling the woman he really loves that he's got to finish the mission.
Interesting. There's one part kind of towards the end where it says the boy turns to the hand that wrote it all. And he kept referring to like saying the hand, it's just moved, referring to the hand and the soul of the world and all that stuff. Do you think the hand was, they say the word is Jesus. Do you think he was referring to the hand as Jesus, or was it just the universe?
That's a kind of, I was just assuming God was the writer of the world kind of deal. And I thought it was cool too when he's like, when they finally figured out, when they talked to the soul of the world, he realized it was him. He was part of the soul of the world. And that's when he got all of his power. And that's why it was the peak of that whole thing, was when he almost became the person ready to become the alchemist. He just didn't know the other stuff. That's why I was asking, because I wondered, it's almost like he went through the whole master's but didn't quite get the PhD.
Yeah, I wrote this down. It said the boy reaches into the soul of the world and realizes it's part of the soul of God, and that it is his own soul. Was the realization he's so unique and special he doesn't need God, or that he is created by God and he is a part of God. I thought that was pretty cool.
Yep. Like the Trinity in a way too, the way he explained it. 3. Yeah, it's one of those books that you're like, you almost want to read it again already, because you're like, I can see other things and it'll read different when I do it, but anyway, yeah, it's definitely a good fun read now that I've read it a bunch.
I found another note here about the story, and I wrote down the alchemist tells the story about the leader who had the 2 sons, the father and the angel. It was very confusing. It was about the dreams, the layers upon layers, which I had referenced a minute ago and couldn't remember exactly. And I had this thought, it's like we spend our entire lifetime trying not to die, but then if you did die and went to heaven, no one would ever come back. So it's like our entire civilization is all of these things that are just trying to help you live longer, but when you do die, if you go to heaven, no one would come back to this world.
Unless there was things that would happen that you knew would be bad. That's why I love studying near-death experiences. There's a lot of people that have near-death experiences and they come back. They have to choose to come back a lot of times. And it's for those reasons, because they'll show you what would happen if you don't. But you can choose not to, because usually it's going to be real painful for that person. But and it's just weird, because a lot of the near-death experiences have that same thought. It's a good thought, because that's what they all say. Like, why would I leave perfection? Like, I can't even explain what not having any weight feels like. Being so free that you're everywhere. Like, whoa.
The alchemist also said, no matter what he does, every person in the world plays a central role to the world and normally doesn't know it.
Oh, absolutely.
I thought that was cool.
I really believe that. We're all so much more important than we realize.
Specifically, I'm going to say that. I'm kidding.
Except me. I just feed my dog. My leg most of the time. One
of these days, people will think you're important.
He's that guy that sold Patrick Mahomes cars. Shouldn't have done that. I still get comments every once in a while.
Oh, I'm sure.
Dude, you sold that?
So let me ask you this. We had the conversation before about, you said the alchemist's treasure wasn't actually gold, but he did actually find the treasure. So do you think in the last scene he actually just realized that his treasure was the woman, or do you think it was the gold?
I think he thinks it's probably the whole journey, the whole story was just awesome,
Or is it himself that is the treasure? He realized his own heart is his treasure.
True that. Yeah, probably more than anything. That he followed his heart and he didn't listen. And even when he got sidetracked, he stayed on focus, even when he's, because I love the crystal shop. That's such a great scene, talking about, that merchant and his dreams and what happened to him over his life. And it was it was like showing him like what he didn't want to do. And that's not how he is. And I definitely can relate to Santiago. That's for sure. Most people think I'm stupid. And then later on they tell me, you did a couple of good decisions. Thank you.
We do think that.
There's one person. So, yeah.
I'm kidding. Yeah, it's definitely a good reminder to go through that. I mean, people always say, it's about the journey, not the destination, and all those kind of cliche phrases, but it's fun to read something like this and have a good reminder not to focus on material things and not to chase things that don't matter, not to waste your time and all of those things. It's fun to look at them through a story like this and just have that reminder.
Well, it's good to get to a destination too and realize that it's really wasn't that rewarding. And people people I like to want to be like, they go right to the next thing. They have another goal, another thing they want to conquer. Too many people just stop, and I think that hero Santiago was going to keep going. That's why I was asking about, like, is he going to become the complete alchemist? Why go 9.5, right?
So I think what you're trying to say is just stay home.
Yes, and feed your dogs before they want to kill you.
Eat you.
Is there any comments in the chat? Nope.
No, we're solo still.
Okay.
It's okay. I don't want anybody in here anyway.
Yeah. It's overrated.
So we're almost at 30 minutes. So we're at the end of part 4 we've done all 4 parts. So how do you think our first book went? Because this is it.
I think it actually went pretty good. And I think once we get a little bit of traction, when we have people asking questions, it'll be hard to keep it under half an hour.
Mm-hmm. I concur. You got anything else you want to add? I'm gonna wrap it up here in next minute.
It's just that it's such a good book. I've read some reviews on his other books, and most people say they're not that great. And but it's kind of a cool. And I like the story how before we forget, like, why it became popular, and that's such a good story how he wrote it, and it wasn't that popular until Bill Clinton was seen with leaving the White House, and then was it Madonna talked about it in Vogue magazine or something, and it caught on with Will Smith, and so it's kind of like a Dazed Confused movie, like it's just like a cult book that came out of nowhere. People they got traction because it's so good. It means a lot to people. So I think that's kind of cool that we read that as our first book. Is this kind of a it's built on being such a good book. It wasn't because it was a bestseller, because it was some author that always puts out the great book,
Right.
So I think what I mean is it's just going to keep getting traction. People are going to keep finding out about the Alchemist and what it means to them. Because I think people can put themselves in some of these roles and places, and that's what makes it easier to follow, I think. Otherwise, it'd be really tough.
funny because I noticed you do that a lot when we talk about the book. Your mindset is you're thinking about yourself as different characters, and I don't do that with fiction. When I read it, I just read the story. But when I read nonfiction, I can plug myself in. Like the next book we're going to do, the American Holocaust. I can envision myself, or I think of myself living that life out, not just not. I think you get what I'm trying to say. I don't really plug myself into the scene when it's fiction, but I do when it's a nonfiction deal.
Yeah.
So.
Well, we'll see how we do with this kind of book. It'll be a little bit slower, maybe a little harder, but it's great information that needs to be known.
Yeah.
With a lot of references. So if you want to get a head start on the book, because we might be missing a week or two because Jason's on a move.
Yep, I am moving, so we'll probably, plus the holidays coming up, so we'll probably take a few weeks off, and then we'll be back probably around the middle of July, but we'll post stuff. So if you guys want to check out the next book, there's not a link, but there's the information in the description below. You can go down there and check it out. It has the title and the author. However you want to pick it up, you can get it from there. And we'll see you all in a few weeks. Later.